everybody, and welcome to the fourth session of Auxillium. We have an exceptionally amazing guest today. Today we're interviewing the incredible Caitlin van der Merwe, and we're going to chat all about STEM and her experience in STEM and recruiting in that space. Caitlin currently is probably one of the leading experts within the engineering space with all of her years. So thank you so much for joining us, Caitlin. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And you flatter me. So yes, I am pretty specialized in your kind of traditional engineering recruitment space. Although recently I have moved away from that and into healthcare, into an internal team. But I spent 6 years developing a desk, building a team, and then eventually running the portfolio for engineering for my previous company. Where we focused on kind of your broad-based engineering skill sets outside of tech. So industrial, mechanical, electrical.
It's okay.
You can see it's been 3 months since I did any engineering. Yeah, so that's really my background. Not an engineer by any type of qualification. Started not even knowing what an engineer was. And just through candidates and clients, I learned everything there is to know.
That's awesome. Baptism by fire. It's the best way to get
100%. And isn't that just recruitment in general?
It is.
It's always baptism by fire.
Nobody ever says, you know what I really want to be when I grow up? A recruiter. It's not on that list of things.
I don't think that's a profession that people necessarily aim for.
No, but we love it once we hear. And once you've been there long enough, you never leave. It's a thing.
Yeah. With that whole recruiter lifer thing, definitely in that bucket.
Exactly. So perhaps as a starting point, I'd love to sort of get an idea from your side. What are some of the common errors that you see in CVs within the engineering, and now maybe a little bit into some of the other areas that you work with? What are some of the common errors?
So that's a great question. I think maybe I can start with like a baseline. What are the common errors we see in general? And then I'll move into a little bit more specific on the engineering side. So in general, the biggest things that we see, we actually used to compile this little running list of CV bloopers. Very entertaining. I probably have it somewhere. But the biggest frustration I find in general with CVs is that people are not listing their current experience first and the most relevant information right at the top, because I don't think people realize how quickly recruiters screen a CV. It's like under 10 seconds you spend on a CV. So if that person has to scroll through 10 pages to get to the relevant information, you've probably lost them already and they've probably screened you out. Another big mistake I see all the time, which I find highly frustrating and surprising, is people not putting their contact details on their CV.
I know.
I don't know if you've seen that, but there's been so many times when I've opened up a CV, like, this looks great, I want to call the candidate, screen them, and whoop, there's no cell phone number or email address. And they've applied via a PNet or something where you actually don't get access to their real email address. So yes, guys, please don't be that person where you don't put your details on your CV. Engineering specific, I think some of the things that, the big things that I've noticed that candidates mistake, the mistakes that they make, is assuming the person reading their CV knows what a mechanical engineer does. So, and that's quite a big deal, because it's making quite a large jump, and they leave out all the details of their role because they have this assumption that, oh, I'm a mechanical engineer, that's pretty straightforward, they should know what I'm doing. But in every different environment, you can have a mechanical engineer in a consulting firm, and their core job function is more around the design side, whereas a mechanical engineer in manufacturing, it's more around maintenance. So it's two really, really different ends of the spectrum, but I can't make that assumption, and I have to make that assumption because you're not putting that detail in your CV. So that's a big one. So guys, please list out minimum 5 of your biggest duties, and use really, really specific keywords like maintain or design, because that is what a recruiter is going to be using to find your profile.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing that I notice with engineering CVs is that they never list the kind of technologies and equipment and design packages that they are accustomed to using. And that's also a big faux pas, because when recruiters search, if we're looking for a mechanical engineer, that is such a wide spectrum that we have to narrow it down by. So if I'm looking for a mechanical engineer for a client who specializes in blow and injection molding, I'm going to put those terms into my search because I need that specialty. And if it's not in your CV, I'm not finding you.
Exactly.
I'd say those are the biggest ones.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, if you don't put it together, like, this is what I'm doing and like what my day to day is, it's really hard for us to make that assumption. And it's also hard to then make sure that the role that you're working with is sort of a good match for that person, right? If you don't tell me, I might put you in the opposite side of where you want to go.
There we go. Then they're going to get the calls they don't want.
Exactly.
And it wastes everyone's time.
Exactly. And I mean, this sort of segues into interviewing as well. What do you think is important to highlight when you are interviewing within this sort of industry?
Great question. And this, I normally, in a pre-interview with the candidate, or what we call the agency interview, I'd normally spend that time prepping them as to what they can expect from an interview with the hiring company and what kind of questions that they're going to get thrown at them. But again, it's going to come down to technologies, equipment, and packages that they've used, because there are some standard there are some standards that are expected, and then there's also some specifics that might be asked. But if I'm a electrical engineer and I'm interviewing for a light current PLC engineering role for a manufacturing company, what's going to be really relevant in that interview is unpacking the PLC technologies that you've used and understanding how those. So you've also got to understand, these are the technologies I've used. These are the ones that are market related and what the company's looking for. And how do my packages and design software experience or technologies experience, how does that plug into what the company's looking for? Because you could have a company looking for someone with exposure to Allen Bradley PLCs, for example, and you've got exposure only to Siemens. Now, the right prep work that you do is to go and understand what's the difference between the two, and is my skill transferable, and then how do I sell that into the company?
That is such a great way to put it. I love the fact that you do a bit of diligence around, this is my skill and how my skill transfers. And I think that's true in most industries. If you are in that space, you don't have to know every single tool and software that there is.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
But your skills transfer still. So I know you've done some cool stuff with Varsity College around their 10-year plan prep, and that's something that you're super passionate about. Can you give us some insight in terms of how you guide candidates on their 10-year plan?
Okay, so yeah, I did a session with Varsity College recently. It is my alma mater, so that's great. And one of my previous recruitment consultants is actually working in their career center at the moment. So I had a really great little segue into them. So I did a session with their students to talk around, and that was specifically their psych students, but just to talk around how they can take what their end goals are and then work it back to what tangible steps do you have to take now to get where you're going. So when we look at that in the context of engineering, the first question I always ask my candidates, what physical environment do you see yourself sitting in 10 years? Are you going to be sitting at a desk, working behind a computer, or are you going to be in a factory and getting your hands dirty? And I think if you can answer those two, I mean, obviously factory is a little bit narrow. Factory, you could expand that to just field. So that could be working in the field, it could be on a site, it could be in a factory. But there is a big difference between office and field-based. And I think if they understand which one appeals to them most, then you can kind of work out a plan backwards from there. So I'm going to give an example of, let's go with a mechanical engineer, because that's probably the most common engineering discipline in the country. So if you are a mechanical engineer and you're sitting in front of me and saying, you know what, I want to be one day in an office, I want to be an EXA registered engineer, and I want to be doing design work. Then I'll say to the candidate, okay, now let's work this back, because that kind of role, you're looking at a PR or professional engineer, where you have now the legal ability to sign off on drawings, and you take, it's very similar to another qualification in the more manufacturing space or mining space called the GCC, which I'll unpack a little bit more in detail. But you've got to then know that what are the career steps I need to take to get to where I want to go. So if you know that that's the area you want to move into, then your first step is to go register as an EXA engineer, candidate engineer. And then you've got to go find work experience in a consulting firm so that you can get your design exposure, you can get mentored by a professional engineer so that you can complete your portfolio of evidence in order to register as a professional engineer. Whereas if the candidate's saying to me, I'd like to be head of a manufacturing operation one day, or an operations manager, then I know that this person needs to go down the GCC route, which is the government certificate of competency, very similar to a professionally registered engineer, except they take legal liability for the equipment on a plant or in a site. So if, for worst case scenario, someone dies on the site, they are legally responsible to ensure that that equipment wasn't in bad state, or that there wasn't negligence involved. So both of those hold quite a high level of responsibility, and they're both really solid career tracks, but it's understanding where you want to be and then working those steps backwards. It's hard to give too much of a general overview because there's obviously quite a lot of specifics that come into it. But what I always say is I always encourage people to reach out to me. If you've got a specific scenario you want me to work through with you, even though it's not my space anymore, it's not where I make money anymore, it's not my core job function, I still love it. You know, I miss engineering recruitment. It's always going to be my first love. So if there's any young engineers, any graduates out there that really don't know which way to turn, I'm here for it.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that concept of thinking, where do I see myself, like physically? And I know back in our agency days, that was something that you also had the conversation with when someone was accepting an offer, was you sort of had that thing of, can you imagine yourself walking into this company on a Monday, having a cup of coffee and doing things? Because it makes it real, and it makes it easier for you to decide, is this the right move for me? And I think perhaps to extrapolate that into other industries, there are tons of recruiters that care about the people that they work with. Yes,
absolutely,
there are questionable people out there. There will always be. But I mean, people like you, and I'd like to think like the stuff that we're doing as well within the various industries, like there's always someone who's happy to help. And if they can't help you, they're going to point you in the direction of someone who can.
100%.
As a grad, do you think it's worth going to see a recruiter as well as supplementing your job search or reaching out to people in your field? What would you say would be the best approach within the engineering space? Do I just send my CV to a company? What's the best protocol?
So both. So the reality is, with any recruitment agency, they are going to focus on the things that make them money. And companies typically do not go to recruitment agents to hire them grads, because they can go directly to the universities to do that. So it's very uncommon for agencies to get grad roles. But that said, it doesn't mean that they don't get them at all. I mean, I did a program for one of our big pharmaceutical clients at the beginning of the year, where we helped them. Well, we did the full hiring and onboarding of 13 graduates for their graduate development program. So it's not that that's not possible. It's just that it's very unlikely. But most good recruiters, particularly specialized ones who are passionate about what they do, and you can typically spot them by how they engage with their market on LinkedIn or on other platforms like Twitter. You can typically spot the good ones. Those ones are generally willing to spend the time with you. I used to do it all the time. Even if I couldn't get anything out of it, I used to like to supplement the kind of work that made me money, but then also the work that gave me a sense of purpose. And I think that's true for a lot of recruiters, because the job is tough. You kind of want to have the opportunity to give back. So I absolutely recommend you reach out to recruiters. I would focus on, particularly if you're a graduate, focus on specialist recruiters. because a generalist recruiter is even less likely to have the right kind of opportunities for you in the grand scheme of their portfolio or desk.
Yes.
But the right tactic, the best tactic for you as a grad is to, and this is what the advice I'd always give my graduate candidates, is to first do your plan and figure out what does that next step look like to you. And then go out, and it's hard work. I'm not saying that this is something that materializes out of nowhere. It's a lot of work to put this together. But the next step is to then map out all the companies in South Africa who do the things that you want to do and who could make sense for you as that first step. And then target their HR department. So whether it's by going on their website, seeing their career page, sending your CV through, following up with a phone call. I always believe in a phone call follow-up. It makes you human to the person at the end of the line.
Yes.
But yeah, you almost just have to like spam it out there, particularly at grad level, because the opportunities are limited. But because you're not specialized yet, you can actually almost do anything in the field. But yeah, you just got to get your profile out there and just start networking, connect with specialist recruiters on LinkedIn, because if you're in their network, then their network can see you. It's all about visibility. I always recommend PNet, Careers 24, and Career Junction. I think those are, to me, the best reputable job portals in the country. And also, please fill out the forms. I know people complain a lot about but it's all on my CV. Why do I have to refill it in? Well, you know what? Because it's a program running it in the background, and the program's not able to identify every field in your CV and match it up with their fields. But if you leave those fields blank, all you're doing is limiting your visibility to recruiters and hiring companies. So, take that extra 10 minutes, fill out each little block, fill it out meticulously, take care and time with it. You only have to do it once. And that will be the difference between 10 recruiters seeing you or 5 recruiters seeing you.
Yeah, it's so true. It's much easier to explain it to people now that we start using hashtags on our social platforms, because it works exactly like a hashtag trending.
Algorithm.
You got to play to the algorithm. If you want to be visible, you add the things that you want to be visible for. And that being said, the fun part as a grad is the fact that you get to start seeing what those companies are doing as well. Like, you do a bit of due diligence on them and it will return in kind as well. I personally am a big proponent of having a portfolio if you can have some sort of portfolio, even if it's a side hustle, a little baby passion project that you're working on, that it speaks volumes. That being said, it's probably hard to do that within an engineering space, but it is.
Depends on the skill set. It's possible, but not for all. Not for all. But then detail the projects. And if you don't have a portfolio of work, then list out your projects, because the key terms that pop up in your projects, even if they were university projects, it's relevant. But those key terms are what makes you findable.
Yeah, that's so true. And
so you might have done like a project on thermodynamics and you would have no reason to list thermodynamics anywhere else in your profile. But because you listed that, and I'm looking for an engineer with exposure to thermodynamics, now you're going to pop up in my search.
Exactly.
Really that simple.
It's awesome. So I do want to ask from your side, what are you working on? You're doing some cool stuff at the moment, so I'm keen to hear what's next and sort of how we can plug you a little bit as well.
So, I mean, nothing major in my private capacity. In my professional capacity, we've got our head down, ramping up to the end of the year, trying to finish all of our HR projects. It always gets a little bit crazy at this time of the year. Hopefully going to be doing some exciting US recruitment soon. I did last week. If anyone wants to go look, I probably have to look up the address, but I did a session on what are recruitment agencies and how can you get the best out of them. It was an Instagram live session that we did. So if you follow Lubna_HR, that's L for Lion, O for Oscar, B for Betty, N for November, A for Apple, _HR. Our live session was recorded there. So if you've got any burning questions about recruitment agencies, what they do, how they make their money, we covered how to spot a scam. We covered how to get the best out of your recruitment consultant. So that's all recorded there live. So you can go check that out. I will probably be doing a follow-up session with them as well on how to, so targeted strategic job searches we're going to cover as our next topic. So if you're following that page, you'll get updates about when that's going to happen. But we're going to do some live job searches. So I'm going to teach candidates how to leverage techniques like Boolean and X-ray searching in their job searches. And it's going to be a really, really exciting session. So I don't think people realize that there's actually some tactics and strategy involved in finding the right job adverts. So yeah,
yes, I love that.
It's going to be an exciting one.
It's going to be amazing, actually. I love that. Giving people the tools to actually empower themselves. Caitlin, you are the bomb. Thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure.
I'm so excited to share this with everyone else. And that's it from us. We'll see you guys next session. Cool.
Thank you. Bye.